Hi, I'm Stacy Rothwell, Sales Support Engineer and Demo Artist for Sony. Let's get right to it. The control panel is made up of modular components. Each one of these components can be moved inside or outside the control panel and to any different place on the control panel. This allows different operators like, say, sports TDs or news TDs to have a different layout. If somebody comes in a truck and sees the shotbox modules here and they would prefer it down here closer to program preset, it's a very simple operation to move it. Both the MVS 8000 and the DVS 9000 are completely format changeable. The MVS 8000 is true multi-format, which means that it can do HD and SD and different sources, whereas the 9000 is standard def and PAL only. By going to the engineering setup menu, selecting system and format, I can change any of these frame or field rates or any of these line rates. I can also adjust the screen aspect ratio, whether setting the entire system to 16:9 or 4:3, or by pressing independent, I can have independent aspect ratios on every ME, DME channels, and each switcher chassis that's connected to the system. The switcher's architecture uses a dual LAN architecture in terms of communication. What that means is the first LAN works with control. That is this kind of thing. Fader bar, auto trans, punching buttons on the switcher. That's control. That uses a proprietary protocol that's real time because, let's face it, if a director asks you to take camera 1 and it takes a second or so for the switch to actually get the command through, it tends to be bad. The second LAN is the data LAN. That's where all things like loading effects, snapshots, frame memories, all that kind of stuff happens. That is packetized and uses the industry standard FTP protocol to send data back and forth, whether it's to another switcher, whether it's to loading internally into this switcher, or through the internet with our system manager option from Atlanta to New York. Having the separate LANs keeps both types of communication completely separate so that it's not possible to be loading megabytes after megabytes of stills and have it possibly interfere with the control of the switcher. Let's talk about the switcher's components in terms of device and tally. The device controller can handle up to 30 devices, 12 of which are active at any one time under any active setup. On the tally side, the switcher can have over 50 tallies as a minimum configuration or over 250 tallies as a maximum configuration. This can be as simple or complex as your facility needs, because in one system you can have 2 switcher chassis, 4 control panels, and 2 device control chassis all on the same LAN. Sony offers 3 different versions of DMEs depending on which type of switcher you have. For the DVS 9000, we offer the BKDS 9470 plug-in DME board set. For the MVS 8000, we actually offer 2 different versions of DMEs, the mid-level MVE 8000 and the ultra-high-end MVE 9000. No matter what switcher you have or what digital effects, you can do effects like this. These effects, up until now, have only been available on external DME systems. The first module we're going to talk about is the transition module. This is a standard transition module. We do make a couple of different variations, but this is the most popular. If you've used a switcher before, this will look pretty familiar to you. Background, DSK1, DSK2, 3, and 4. If you were upstream, it would say key 1, key 2, key 3, and key 4. It works pretty much like any other switcher out there, using the fader bar. If I'm in background, I'm going to dissolve the background. And the background, of course, means the A and B bus on the crosspoint selectors. If I want to bring a key in, I can simply select the key. What this actually is the next transition area. And what this says is, by either moving the fader bar or hitting auto trans or cut, what will be affected on the switcher and what will be changed on the program bus. So in this particular configuration, if I hit DSK1 and move the fader bar, it will bring in the CG. And if I take it in and out, same thing with the auto trans button and the cut button. It will cut it in and out. I can also gang them together. If I hold down background and DSK1 together, what you'll see now on the program preview monitor is what will be happening after the next fader action or auto trans or cut. From now on, I'll refer to it as a fader action. So now when I move this, we're dissolving the background and bringing the key in at the same time. And this is a pretty typical thing, especially in a news situation like this. I might actually go on a 2-shot, cut to the single, and lose the key. Notice the preview monitor automatically showed what the next thing that was going to happen when I lost the key. If I moved the fader bar, it would show that I would be picking camera 2 along with the key again. Moving down to here, this is the transition type. We have mix, non-additive mix, super mix, preset color mix. For those of you that used some switchers in the past, this is the same thing as preset black, except on this one we allow you to preset a color, like say white, to do a white flash. We have wipe and DME, which is probably the most single powerful thing on the switcher. Mix, of course, is a dissolve. A non-additive mix is something that's kind of a legacy from older switchers. Basically what it does is it gets rid of the darker portions of the screen before it brings up the lighter portions of the screen. Super mix is the old splitting the fader bars. It electronically does it. Preset color mix, as I said, what this does is this acts as a modifier. If I wanted to dip to black between going from this camera to this camera, one action of the fader bar would dip it to black. The next action would bring it up on what I had on preset. There are a couple of other modes you can use with preset color mix. In this particular mode, which I just changed in the engineering setup, this allows me to do a single stroke. So say I want to do a white flash, instead of having to use 2 fader actions, I can use a single fader action to do a white flash in between something. Notice that, as expected, the preset color mix functions one time. It then allows you to go back to what you were doing. So if I was doing a dissolve between camera 1 and 2, and then perhaps dissolving to something else, and I wanted to do a white flash back to the first camera, I press this, and now with a single action I go back to white flash, but I'm immediately ready to dissolve again. Moving into wipes, double punching on this allows me to bring up any menu. Notice that on the control panel there are no wipe buttons. That's because most of them are contained inside the menu. Wipe allows me to simply do a wipe. And since I've called up the menu, I can adjust any of the different patterns. These are basic patterns. There's many more modifiers that we'll talk about later. Go over here and do a wipe like this. I can set up a mosaic wipe, go back and forth between things. But basically, it's pretty much like most wipe generators on most switchers. The DME button is where it becomes increasingly powerful. We're all used to doing simple wipes, say between stories or in sports or things like that, going between 2 different things. The nice thing about wipes is that it's very easy. I simply preset what I want on the preview bus and wipe between the sources. In the past, it was very difficult to be able to use DMEs to do effects between, say, very short VO stories, say in sports. Now, with the advent of this feature on the switcher called DME Wipe, what this allows me to do is, just like a wipe, if I double punch the DME button, it calls up this menu. And depending on whether I want a 1-channel, a 2-channel, or a 3-channel effect, I can choose something as simple as these preset patterns, which this, if I touch this, this would give me a slide over. This is functioning exactly the same way that a wipe would, meaning that I would preset what I want. You can even see the preview monitor go to this. And now I can do this digital effect with no more trouble than using a wipe. Maybe I select one of these. Maybe I come over here and do a flip. Notice here that behind this, when the background video is exposed, that I can use one of the utility buses, which we'll talk about later on the switcher, to feed the background. I can come in and do a basic page turn. I can do rolls. I can even do picture-in-picture. I can also do customized effects. In here, this shows that I have built new effects. This one here causes the switcher to use a digital effect to refocus something and dissolve a new picture in. This one is a lighted page turn, a 3-dimensional page turn with shadows in it. I can even use 2-channel effects. Again, if I go to the basic ones, I hit this button, and this allows me to do, this would be a compression and expansion. Not quite what I would like to see for a cube, but I have one of those later. If I hit one of these, this does a push-push. So now what I can do here is I can actually use, like on the 1-channel effects, I can use user program effects. These are effects that I've programmed with 2 channels. And as you can see here, it provides intersecting planes and combiners on the 2-channel effects. So I can select, say, that one. Here is an actual cube, which has 3 dimensions to it. Here is a dual page turn. And here's just an example of orbiting, and you can see the textured lighting on the DME. But that's just an example of the power that you can use with the DME wipe button. Down here, normal, reverse, and normal, reverse. This allows me to change the direction. So if I wanted them to go a different direction, if I came into here and went back to a one-channel effect and select a slide, this allows the picture to slide on or to slide off. And of course, normal reverse, you may also know this term as flip-flop. This would allow it to just go backwards and forwards. Down here, this particular button here is called Transition Preview. And what this allows you to do is, let's say I wanted to wipe that CG on. So I would select DSK1 and wipe. Unfortunately, most producers tend to frown on checking this on the air. So what Transition Preview allows me to do is, when I hold this down, if you watch the preset monitor, this now allows me, while I'm holding this button down, to run whatever I'm going to do and check it on preset. And it can be as complicated as I want. Let's say I wanted to do something like that where I'm ganging background and DSK1 together. Again, this allows me to see it, even on program preset, what I'm going to do without affecting air. Since we have 4 keyers, we now have an issue of key priority. So now let's take a look at the key priorities. I'm going to put all 4 keys in so we can see key 1, key 2, key 3, and key 4. If I hold this down, I now press the 4 keyers in order from bottom to top in which way I want them to go. So now, if I wanted to have DSK4 on the bottom and 1 on the top, I would hold this down and hit DSK4, followed by 3, followed by 2, followed by 1. Notice now on the display, it's showing DSK1 is on top and DSK4 is on the bottom. As you can see on the program monitor, they've changed. Another way to do this, and I think a little easier, is if you double press the priority set button, the menu will change and you'll get a graphical representation of what it is, along with status displays up here. The last thing we need to cover on this area of the transition module is transition rate. As we move over to what we call the 10 keypad, if we come to the right over here, you'll see the display shows program preset is currently set to 20 frames. If I go up here and change this to 1 second, or if I set 14, it now sets it to 14. The next thing we want to do is jump up to this little device up here called the FlexiPad. It's called a FlexiPad because its function is flexible. In other words, it's not just a typical memory recall panel or something like that. It does multiple functions. One of the biggest features on this is that the buttons have color LCDs built into them. This allows us, in this particular mode here called Snapshot, to see what the effect name is. Instead of just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it allows us to see it. Jumping over here real quick, this is where we can set the transition rate for this particular ME bank, which is ME3 that I'm on. It works just like the 10 keypad down there. I hit trans rate. It's telling me I have a current rate of 1 second, which is also duplicated down here on the transition area. And I can type in the number, 10, enter, or 120 will give me 1 second, 20 frames. So getting back to Snapshot. Snapshot is Sony's term for a memory of the entire mix effects bank. Meaning that if I come up here to ME3, which I'll punch up on program preset here, and we'll turn all the keys off, and we'll get up there and set up for just a plain old wipe. Maybe have the wipe halfway through the switcher. If I want to store this, notice that there is no store button. You store on the Sony switcher by holding down Snapshot and then pressing the button you want to store it into. So notice here I just stored Snapshot 7. So let's say I come up here and I'm going to select a different wipe now. I'll hold down Snapshot and hit 8. As I recall these, between 7 and 8, it's showing the different snapshots and what they were at the moment that I stored them. There are actually 99 registers on the switcher of snapshots, and you get to those by selecting the banks. Over here on the right-hand side is a button called Bank 0. That lets us basically have the first 10 registers, 1 through 10. If I hit Bank 1, this shows us register 11 through 20. If I want to get to a higher bank, I can hit the bank select button. If I hit 8, this shows me now I'm in the 80s. So here I've got 81 through 90. Up here on the top, this is showing me that I'm in bank 8, but that the last one I called up was number 6. So I always know where I'm going and where I've come from. Let's talk a little bit about the menu system and how it works. The menu is a color touchscreen that runs the Linux operating system. On the left-hand side of the menu are basically group operators. In other words, this is DSK1, this is DSK2, this is DSK3. On the bottom are the adjustments and the subcategories that you would use for this category over here. So DSK type would let me adjust things like the luminance, the linear, the clip and gain, that kind of thing. However, the quickest way to get to something is by double pressing. Anywhere on the switcher that you think might have a menu associated with it, you can double press. For instance, if I double press the keyer button here, it will automatically call up the Program Preset DSK1 menu. Let's touch briefly on the setup of the switcher and how we get the switcher to change its personality depending on what we want to do. Over on the menu display, there's a button called Engineering